Hey, Ivanka, how's it going? What did you do this week?
What did I do this
Yeah.
week? I listened to our podcast that we recorded last
Okay.
week.
How did
And
that
I
feel?
found it quite interesting that I listened to it and I didn't mind it.
We've become self-referential immediately. That wasn't.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, what would you do if you just written? Didn't you listen to it?
Of course, I listened to it.
you
Well,
must
obviously,
have.
I learned that recording something sort of an hour or so long means obviously you have to listen to it for at least 1 hour to edit it, and probably 3 or 4. So that was exciting, but I think it came together okay. We're going to make it.
Yeah, so yes, I did listen to that, and that made me think, and it made me listen to a few other podcasts that I hadn't previously
What
heard.
did you listen to?
I hadn't actually listened to Adam Buxton, which I enjoyed. He was talking to a Syrian refugee, and I did I was in my kitchen cooking and crying because it was quite, but actually it was really jolly, but it was also moving. It wasn't sad, it was moving, I think is what it was. But the guy was amazing. But then I've ended up with the jingle for the podcast in my head.
He has taken some liberties with that outro jingle. First when I heard it, I was like, oh, that's a good idea. And now I'm like, Adam.
So I listened to that. That was cool. I started listening to another one, and then reached my destination. So I stopped listening. And then, but I'm quite a fan of the Desert Island Discs, which obviously isn't a podcast in this sense of the word, but it is a podcast. It is a thing that you can listen to through your podcast app.
Sure.
It's radio, but it's good radio, and I really enjoy Desert Island Discs because it always makes me think. Anyway, listen to Naomi Klein, and I listened to Professor Phil Scraton, and he's the guy that did all the research for Hillsborough,
Right.
and was pivotal in the people now being arrested with the new findings that none of the fans are to blame for anything that happened that day, all that. But he was and there was some good Catholicism references in there,
Good.
Michael.
Good.
so something to perhaps revisit. The Naomi Klein was interesting, of course.
My sort of Radio 4 podcast of choice is In Our Time, but I use it for sleeping on sort of long haul flights.
Oh.
I use it to sleep coming back. Well, not long haul, but coming back from America. I will sort of cuddle up in my seat, have the noise of the plane kind of rumbling, and I'll have like Melvin Bragg talking about something very sort of esoteric and sort of academic that I'm kind of not really understanding any of it, but it soothes me into sleep. And I wake up back in London.
Well, it's not a bad call. The only thing I don't like about or maybe I do, the Desert Island Disc thing is that I can't decide if the podcast is better than the show because you don't have to listen to the music. What was your week like?
Well, obviously my album came out last week, and I don't know, it's been kind of an intense one of just emotionally adjusting to its inevitable sort of like, I went out to a couple of things, and just this week I sort of had a day off, and I've just been, I don't know, sorry, and my week's been a bit shitty.
Really?
Although lots of, it's almost like, as many of my friends as I could have expected have been really supportive and even written up my album and shared it, and I see all the nice things that them and then their friends have been saying about it, but I don't know how much is enough for me. It's like I need that. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what I need from this thing, and I think it's pretty clear that it's certainly not something that nourishes one emotionally.
When you're making music, who are you? Why are you making music?
Okay.
It's like,
to be honest, I think one of the main reasons is just a sort of as I was younger, I heard music and was excited about it. I wanted to know how you do that. I wanted to try and understand what it is about it that, what are the mechanics of affecting someone's emotions. like in these ways. Like, so it's sort of like a technical fixation on one level, just of what are the bits and pieces that I combine? How do I get that sound? What is it about this piece of music that is making, can I kind of untangle that? But the fact that seems to be an absolutely intractable problem, like a challenge. It's not something that you can ever find a logical formula for. And that's why I'm kind of drawn to it so much, because it's just, it defies creating a formula. Because if two people do something that kind of sounds the same, then it doesn't work the second time. You have to do something more, or you have to do something different, or you have to kind of do something meta, or you have to just, but like, and the weird thing of like how people they love something that's different, but not too different. Like there's a certain amount of different that people will get excited about, but if it goes too far off, then it becomes so there's a technical fascination with it, but then there was, at school when I was sort of 15 was this kind of like horrible place. But then like someone said, "Oh, do you want to join our band and play keyboards?" And that was sort of the first time that I really got any, sort of social acceptance at school with like my peers, and I'd be making music, and I'd come into the sort of sixth form common room, and like my latest tape that I'd done on my computer was playing. It was a way of sort of bypassing my fears of like, I think I find it hard to kind of let my guard down to like in sort of casual social situations. Even to this day, like last night, had some issues with kind of a group situation, just because I'm not capable of people I don't know very well, kind of letting myself show to start with. Whereas music, it's like, okay, well, maybe we can sort of like crash through that wall, and people will know me without me having to kind of like go through that terrifying process on my own. And then so it just kind of was that, and it was that friendship and that and like it's fun I got a taste of what it was like to be famous at university. Like we won the band competition, and suddenly everywhere I went, people were like congratulating me and wanting to buy me drinks, and like girls were coming up to me that I just would have not even dared like go anywhere near. And like it was, I was like, yeah, I like this. I want this again, but in real life. But so it's slightly ironic that over the years, a lot of the things that I enjoyed about it aren't a part of my music making anymore, and it's kind of turned back into this slightly more, trying to find mastery over the sort of craft, and figure out how to find a way that people enjoy listening to what I'm doing but in a way that I can also enjoy making, and that I will also enjoy playing over and over again. So I sometimes I'm not sure why I do it, but it's just a compulsion. It's innate. It's like it's something I couldn't not do. So which yeah.
Oh, it just sounds like when you first started talking, I thought, oh, he's just designing something.
No.
But no, it's not at all.
I'm not solving a problem. This is the thing. Like I think a lot of commercial music is solving a problem. It is more of a design thing. It's like people need something to dance to in a club, and if you can just take it on that level, I think you have a much easier time. But if you're trying to do something artistic that's coming from you a bit more, then like this is a huge problem for me. I'm not solving a problem that anyone's got. So it has no value to people. So, how do you make that? Pay some bills.
That's true.
Don't worry what's deep down inside. Don't worry what you've left behind.
It's Friday again, we're recording. We're doing our second podcast. And we decided, in the spirit of grand topics, that we would choose death this week as our project, as something to talk about. Because I think we both have had experiences that have made us, I don't know, our attitudes are possibly more idiosyncratic than most. I don't know. But I thought we could sort of talk about a couple of experiences and like what we learned from those.
What we learned.
How they've
Yeah,
shaped
good.
our outlooks. And
I think it's an important part of our makeup.
not just death in the literal sense. I think it's an important part of creativity. It's an important part of really just anything. You know, you can't have anything without death. You can't have life. You can't create things without other things dying. You can't have change without losing things.
But yes, death. How do we want to tackle death?
Well-
do we do a quick run summary of dead relatives?
That might be it. Who wants to go first? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think the most significant death in my life is clearly the sudden death of my father when I was 20. But I think what made that more significant is that it had happened after we had so I have never been a refugee in the sense of in the true sense of the word. I am not. We left the former Yugoslavia with British citizenship. We came home, you could say. So, but that doesn't mean, and you know, there's a whole topic around, you know, guilt and things. But it did mean that at 16, I left a country. I was not involved in the physical. I was not physically present in the war. I watched it from a distance. I heard about the death of my friends. We got through. But we did leave Yugoslavia very suddenly and with no particular plan. So we came to the UK and with very little money, somebody lent us a flat, blah, blah, blah. It took a while for my family to go on.
So your sort of British legacy was what you'd moved out that way, the family had moved out that way, or there was, what was that?
Well, I was born here, lived here till I was 8. My mum's
Right.
like proper English,
Okay.
proper British, and my late father was not. He was born in Yugoslavia. He's Croat, and he became naturalised British at some point before we left when I was 8. And so, you know, we just came back, which people can do if they are citizens. And but you know, anyway, Yugoslavia is a long story, but my point is really to do with the death thing, is that we'd had this very sudden and dramatic change in our family, and then we've got ourselves together. Both my parents were working, we could afford holidays, life was normal, and then just as we were back on the straight and narrow, my father died very suddenly, and I think that was. You know, it is a trauma, but it was on top of a trauma. So I think it's taken me many years to find out what I think about it and how I want to live with it and how I deal with it, and lots of different.
So there's like 3 sort of death-like events there. There's moving away from, like, when you were 8.
Yeah.
And then there's leaving a place that you'd sort of settled down in when you were 16, and then there's, you know, your father when you're 20. So that's sort of quite a lot of kind of upheavals to process.
Yes. And so I think that definitely there's anything that's happened since then has been massively that obviously affects a person. There's no way around it. It certainly affected me, but I think in many ways but it's not something that makes me sad all the time or sad all day
Well, that's
or anything.
not how it
like
works.
that.
I think
It's
that's
not
the
how it
point.
works, no.
That's why this isn't a miserable podcast episode.
No,
because
no.
it's about death, but death isn't just about feeling sad. It's about, you know, it's more than that.
It's more than that. So that I think that's as quickly as I could do my summary. I don't think I could do it any more quickly. Do you want to do your summary?
Okay, let's get them out the top.
Your death summary?
So my sort of major death thing was when I was 5. My mother died all of a sudden, and And yeah, like I guess the rest of my life has sort of been an echo of the consequences of that, really. It was a suicide. It was a Catholic. There was some sort of Catholic fundamentalism in the mix. There was some like from my perspective, it was sort of very much couched in going to heaven and all this kind of sort of Christian mythology. Yeah, without going into any details, it's hard to. Well, basically, she sort of left my father with 4 tiny children. I was the eldest of the 4, so she'd had 4 children in 6 years, and then sort of like gone. So he was suddenly kind of left with us, and I think he had a lot to carry, and the way that came out was in maybe ways that were hard for me as a child to deal with. So it's like there's the death, and then there's the sort of the aftershock of that just kind of lasts for years and years and years, especially something like this where there's no one to blame. It's just someone kind of disappearing from their body all of a sudden and not being who they were before. I've always been acutely aware of death from a very, very young age, and initially it was couched in terms of having to be good to go to heaven, and then later on it was couched in terms of sort of the transhuman condition and how we like modify it, how we kind of increase our longevity to sort of avoid death, and artistically it's like, how do I kind of make sure that I don't immediately disappear the second that I die? And it's always been kind of front and center of my sort of consciousness.
Yes. So those are our backgrounds.
Cool podcast, guys. Cool podcast. This is. I'm definitely enjoying this one on my commute. Definitely want to go to work thinking about this.
One of the things you were saying about it never goes away, it just transforms. And I think, you do have your childish or your child's interpretation of a thing, and then you shape and grow, and then as your life changes, how you think about that particular death event. So, for example, I take the death of my father probably being as the one that sits with me most, because I miss him. I want to tell him things, and that's just the way. And as my life changes, there's a new thing I want to tell him about, or I'd like his input on. Frankly, I wanted him to tell me what to do after Brexit. I was like, I really did. I was like, so he knew that he had the wherewithal politically to know that there was actually going to be a war and that we should leave. And I don't mean that somebody told him. I mean that he read the chessboard and decided it was time to go. So after the Brexit result, I was like, fuck, what do I do? What am I supposed to be getting my family out of here? What am I supposed to do? So I did miss him then for his input. But generally, I have a chat with him every so often, usually using my inside voice, not my outside voice. But I don't really think that's what we want to talk about.
No, I think it might be good to just shift gears sort of into a kind of talking about creativity, maybe. The sort of clearest, most brutal form that takes for me is like it's this kill your darlings thing. At the end of if you've created something, it doesn't matter how long it took or how hard you worked on it. You have to be prepared to let it die if it's just not good. You have to be prepared to come back to it and just go, I spent a lot of time and money and like on that, but it's it's not as good as this thing that took me 5 minutes and like I just did like out of nowhere. And I think that's a hard mindset for creative people to embrace, particularly if they haven't sort of had to do it in their lives very much before.
Well, I think that what you're talking about, I encounter very much not in a work environment when you're trying to build something new and create a new system, a new way of doing things. It's the hardest thing with everybody is to get people past this point where they think the idea that they had or what they understood previously to be true can be examined and can be reassessed, and that the new episode isn't necessarily bad. You know, I can't say that that because you find a new normal and a new life, and in work I often find that, you know, even getting people to throw away a piece of functionality in something, and you're like, you know, yeah, we all thought that was a good idea, but it's not, so let's bin it, and now we've had a better idea or whatever. You know, it's like and I think it's very hard for people to move past this
and,
you know, a thing.
And it's coded into practices, and this is what, like, the sort of waterfall, you know, design and software development, you know, practices where you're supposed to think of everything up front that needs to be done and write it all out and plan it in great detail and then do it. Like, that's, if you want to do something good, that's not how it works, and that's why there's all these alternatives, these agile things, these 2-week sprints, and it's because you need to be able to just
redirect.
Yeah, just go, actually, this didn't work. I thought it was going to work, but then this one unexpected thing did turn out to work. But sorry, and the more you have someone in charge that isn't capable of going, oh, I just spent 50 grand on this bit of work, but it's not working. That, you know, they can either take the unenlightened approach and think that if they just spend more time and effort trying to make this thing work, that it will eventually work, or they can do what we're a lot more capable of doing. If I'm working alone, I can just go, oh, I can feel like I'm 90% finished on something, and then realize that the last thing that I can't quite fix actually needs me to redo sort of the entire user interface of something, and like learn from that sort of process, which I could just never see happening in a more team or sort of corporate setting, because it's just not coded into those practices.
Last week we mentioned the sheer force of will behind doing something, or certainly that's how I sort of see some of what I do, is just kind of, right, this, you know, I need to get this done, I'm going to keep pushing until I've got hives, but that'll be, I think my attachment tends to be, which is interesting because it kind of conflicts with what we're talking about now, which is that the idea that if you're more open to the idea of death, be it of, you know, people, ideas, projects, whatever, that the sheer force of will element should be less present, shouldn't it? No, I should find it easier to go, this is a bad idea, stop pushing. But I don't think the openness to change, and I think we're using death as change.
Yeah.
The thing that has brought my own mortality to the front of my mind more than I expected, took me by surprise, was having a child.
Right. Yeah.
And it suddenly, there's no escaping the fact. But it's not that I ever was particularly concerned with dying. I just never really thought about it until I had a child, and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. Okay, what do I need to have done before that? You know, what do I need to do for her? What do I need to do? So that was quite interesting. But I think I've processed that a bit more now. But it makes me, there's that, and a constant sense of anxiety. Those are two things a child brings.
Okay. For the child's safety, for your own...
the child, everything, the world, the child. First it starts this
future.
Very, very long period of, is it breathing? Is it still alive? And then that all sort of morphs into all sorts of, you know, what am I feeling? What have I said the right thing? Have I damaged it forever? Can it go? Is it going to... It's just a never... So you have to, I think, all these tricks that one learns reading and thinking about mindfulness are very useful here. So you have to put the anxiety to one side so that you can live. Because otherwise, if you like,
Well, yeah, you have to just come back to now, don't you, and just go, okay, right,
Okay,
just
yeah,
what
yeah,
are my
all
feet
right.
doing? Okay.
yeah. And so the whole, yeah. So the world is a dramatic place sometimes. When you were talking about the agile versus waterfall type thing,
Yeah.
is that I think the thing that I have learned and I have absorbed more than perhaps some people have had the opportunity to do is that one can make plans in life, and there's absolutely nothing wrong
Yeah.
with having a plan and a direction, but it is not a given that you will be able to execute that plan.
Yes, and there's good
think.
stories about people lost in the jungle finding their way out thanks to a map, even though it turned out to be the wrong map.
Really?
Yeah. Just there's
Where
a
did you-
thing that it was in some I need to, I don't know what the reference is, but like, yeah, like just even just having something that you think is a plan that will work, even if it's completely insane and completely wrong, will, you know, can actually help you to sort of find your way out of a difficult situation.
Wow, I buy that. Or maybe it's a bit about risk. That the death thing actually makes you think about. It's like, actually, what are the risks of making a plan in the first place that you're not, you know, you can't prove, or that you're always making a decision based on what you know today to be true. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the best you can ever do. And tomorrow that might change, and okay, then we'll change the plan. But for now, this is what we're doing. So I think there's something about relationship to risk. And I don't know how risk averse. I think some people would say that I'm not at all risk averse. That I'm quite maverick. But I think that I personally think that I am at least sensible with risk. I like to be aware. I like to have a sense of the risks, but it won't necessarily stop me moving forward, because the risks are, we could all, something horrible could happen tomorrow that I don't know about yet, but based on what I know today, I'll try and mitigate risk by looking both ways when I cross the road.
Yeah.
So when people do that, somebody could be hit by a bus tomorrow, that annoys me.
Well, unpack that.
It's like, yeah, what? Why does it annoy me?
Yeah.
It's like, that's because it's like the risks are that. I don't know. There's some political change. There are risks that are more actually weirdly more likely, I think, than somebody being hit by a bus. I don't know. I don't know why it annoys
I think
me.
like
That's
if
flippant.
someone in the team got hit by a bus, like fuck the project for a few days.
Yeah.
Like suddenly this isn't actually going to seem that important if that happens. So
No. So it's like that will take all bets off. It will be a terrible situation. That's I think that probably is what you.
I mean, I think I've certainly. I think my experiences have meant I take a lot of what I think people would think are risks. I think I do a lot of things that a lot of people would be afraid to do. But then I'm terrified of other things that I think most people wouldn't even think about, or there's I think my attitude to risk is sort of a different shape to most people's. It's sort of it plugs in a different way. It's a different brain chemical. To other, and I'm sure everyone's is different, but I think mine is because I'm pretty, in the workplace, I'm pretty just fearless about anything really. I don't really care about sort of whatever the sort of perceived, order of things is supposed to be in the structures and the hierarchy. I'm just sort of looking at the project and going, okay, how are we going to achieve this? What needs to change? And I would never kind of buy into that well, you are in charge, so that means you know more. So that means I'd better shut up. I'm like, I don't even care if I have this job or not. Like, this isn't what I wanted to do. So I'm just gonna do whatever that it needs.
Yeah, I think I definitely recognise that in myself. I'm not very good with all the I am always only interested in the outcome of a project, of a thing we're making. Is it going to be good or not? I am not bothered about promotions or hierarchy or any of those things. I think what though I am afraid of is commitment.
Okay.
it's like I think in many ways that's probably the opposite, where I say I'll take massive risks in my life, like riding sitting on the back of a motorcycle.
That's still riding it.
Well, people go, oh, you didn't ride the motorbike. Oh, I'm disappointed. I thought you rode a motorcycle. I'm sorry, I'm not that adventurous. But anyway, so I'll happily sit on the back of a motorbike from Alaska to Argentina. I will change jobs very easily. I freelance. I'm not particularly concerned about long-term contracts and things like that, because I do think that's people are in what they perceive to be a stable work environment. I think that's totally just a fallacy. So I might as well freelance and have the flexibility myself. So I have got equal power to have an extra bit of holiday or change contracts. But when it comes to things like, I don't know, committing to some social event in 2 months' time, I really struggle.
What's that?
A lot of things could happen.
A lot of things could happen. Yeah, I don't know.
I might not be in the mood then. It's like, I know it sounds like a nice idea today, but I don't even think it's conscious. I don't like committing to things. It's true. Other than why so much of managing things always comes back to war?
I don't know.
I did an agile training course recently, and one of the things I adhere to at work, or things I say to people, is ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah.
But this guy that ran this course called it proceed until apprehended. I was like, whoa. It's like, that's a very different, I think
What's that?
asking...
It's like marine talk, isn't it?
I don't know. So, I mean, you're not in an army, you're just delivering, you're just building something for a bank, or I think even the example he was talking about was some, online retail website. I'm like, anyway, so there's quite a lot of aggressive military analogies that people use in the workspace.
So I thought we could pick this up by coming up with some fun hypothetical questions on the subject of death. For instance, so Ivanka, who would you like to die?
Who would I like to die?
Is there anyone that you would like to die?
No.
No, not at all.
And I've got a semi-serious answer to that question.
Yes, good.
Which may or may not be relevant, but is my sister's 10 years younger than me, and she studied philosophy, and she was doing that whilst I was doing my masters. And so we lived together, and she would, because it was philosophy, she'd sit around, and she's always been argumentative, and we've always been up for debate, but we had this, possibly even over a few months, this running debate on whether it was ever okay to kill anybody on the subject of violence and war, and we concluded that no, it was never okay to kill somebody.
I think that's fair.
So I don't wish anyone dead. I wish they'd fuck off, a few of them. But just, if you want to be an arsehole, just go and live on your own then. If you really don't believe that the state of society affects you, then fuck off. It's not the same though. Anyway, what about you? Do
Yeah.
you wish anyone dead?
No, again, it's like I don't know. Yeah, it's just not the right answer, is it?
No.
It's just.
I did
not
some
the
camp.
solution.
I did some campaigning on election day and went door knocking.
Hmm.
I was getting the vote out for Labour.
Yeah,
That's what I do
okay.
on election day.
All right,
And
jeez.
I was doing the daytime shift because that's when my child is in nursery. So a lot of the people that we were knocking on their doors were old people.
Yeah.
And we were going round. I had a couple of really unpleasant experiences.
Hmm.
And I did one guy, apoplectic he was. Apoplectic, yes. He was almost like, I thought, God, if he keeps going on, he's gonna die now. It's
God.
gonna be my fault. He was really angry, like quivery lip angry, talking about Trotskyists and stuff. He was very proud to explain that he was 90 years old, and there he was living in his sheltered accommodation, looking very well dressed. He was very sprightly, and I was like, "You're looking very good for 90, sir. Of course, please feel free to vote for whoever you choose to." But he's going on about, I was like, "It's all right for you to get all angry about this, but you've benefited from a fully functioning NHS for the last, it's like, however long you are on the tail end of people who are going to get decent pensions and social care and all this." So, and I was with somebody who was much younger than me, who was in it, and maybe 21, 22, and he was trying to argue with him, and I was like, leave it. He's going to die soon. Let's move on to somebody else. It's like I didn't let the old man hear me because I thought that would be rude, and I'm not like that. But there was a couple of, so I didn't necessarily wish him dead at all. But I was conscious of the fact that hopefully we weren't going to have to deal with him for much longer.
Oh Lord, have you? I once, I remember when I was working for the London Borough of Newham in the housing department many years ago, and had to like cold call people. Had to sort of cold call people on the housing register, and yeah, had a couple of is so and so in? No, they're dead. Awkward moments of not very niceness.
No.
I've got another idea of subject is so the inverse of death, living forever.
Oh yeah.
What do you think about that?
I have actually thought about this only because there's a woman in Brighton who runs an organisation called Think Nation. Her name's Lizzie Hodgson, and she goes around arranging debates for young people, and one of the topics was immortality, and whether or not it was okay, because apparently there are some very wealthy people investing quite a lot of money in the idea of living forever, and they would and
It's cheaper living together, if anything.
you don't need to be a billionaire to live together. But anyway, so they're spending lots of money on these things, and in the next 20 years, apparently, there is a chance that one of their experiments might succeed.
I read
Go on.
I read a book in my formative years, and this was probably one of the last straws in my sort of religious kind of, just like, I was like, well, I don't need this religion anymore. A book called Great Mambo Chicken and the Transhuman Condition.
Right.
I think it's by Ed Regis, which has a lot of the ideas of scientists about how to solve some of the larger sort of death and sort of finiteness defeating problems of the universe. So there was a lot of nanotechnology talk of, if once we can control matter, we can repair ourselves indefinitely and just live forever that way. There was a lot of stuff on like uploading. There was some stuff on sort of cloning yourself and your consciousness and sending copies of yourself out into the universe. And then at the end of time, everyone comes back together and has a big party. And then there was also stuff about, okay, well, the sun is eventually going to die. So what are we going to do about that? And plans for like a Dyson sphere, which is like talking about taking Jupiter and turning it into a sort of shield around the solar system. Even if it's just a disk, that will kind of help us conserve an awful lot of the sun's energy versus if we didn't. There's some heat death of the universe issues that they sort of wanted to address. But yeah, lots of ideas about, like, and what our ideal transhuman form, some kind of disturbing, like, sort of branching, sort of tree-like, fern-like robot things with the fingers branched down and down and down to the size of atoms so that you could just physically make the world just by directly manipulating it with your fingers. And all of this, none of this was in defiance of the current laws of physics, but everything's always 20 years away. And that 20 years, I have come over time to start to become very suspicious of that number when I hear it. Because as soon as something's 20 years away, it's not worth saying. It's not worth talking about, I think. But like we should be striving for that stuff. And some of the things will come true in a completely different way, in a completely mad way. But at the same time, I'm very glad that there's some very wealthy people addressing this, because why do we need to die? But it's like, yeah, like it'd be nice I'd like to live as though I had 300 years to kind of learn things and kind of get good at things and be able to kind of make things for a long time. And it's not necessarily even the sort of overpopulation thing that worries me. It's the fact that kind of on that more abstract, on that sort of like creativity, like is life without death?
Yeah, I don't think that, based on our opening gambit for this conversation, that we could possibly I couldn't possibly think that immortality is a good idea. I really, I mentioned earlier that having a child made me much more aware of my own mortality, made me think about it. I certainly want to be healthier. I don't want to be, living past a certain age can mean a lot more pain and discomfort and lack of ability. I don't want any of that if I can avoid it. But I think I am a better version of my parents, and I expect my child to be a better version of me. And in order for her to be herself, I need to die.
Yeah, I guess there's no getting away from the fact we accumulate some positive things and a lot of negative stuff, and we sort of solidify after a while, and it is kind of time to let someone fresh come in, someone fresh and idealistic, and with
yes,
to whom
who's brave and we've had conversations about mental health before, and I've never necessarily had I had to be medicated for anything, but I have done loads of counselling and therapy and stuff. But I've had moments when I've just felt tired.
Well,
where you just go, look, I need a bit of a, these moments, they're cycles and they pass, but there's as you cycle, you revisit the same thing. Every so often, like, we've had this situation. I'm sorry that all the other people around me haven't had this situation before, but I have, and I don't want to do it again. I'm bored with this now. I know what I think about this, and I don't. This is a lesson I don't want again. I'm on a different one. So it's a kind of a, I think there is a for me. I think immortality. I think good health, yes. Immortality, no.
I think if I've ever felt sort of ready to die, it's been on the back of like a success or a feeling that I've kind of achieved everything I wanted to achieve, and that I guess that must be, I don't know how common that must be a common thing, right? Like, if it's harder to accept the idea of death if you kind of don't feel like you've done everything you could, or like you're struggling, but it's strange how when you feel like you've achieved something, that suddenly it's like, okay, well, what else is there now?
Yeah, I've had that. I've definitely had that feeling of, I've come to this point, and you very quickly you get new thankfully, I think otherwise, why would you bother? You very quickly get a new idea of what you should be doing and why that thing that you've just done wasn't actually, you'd like to do it again or differently or better or another thing, or you learn something new. But I do think there's like these cycles where we go, yay, this is a gate, a pivotal moment, and then there's that pause before you pivot. Yeah, immortality. Yes.
What about like the vampires?
Look, I like a vampire movie.
I think vampires
As
are
much as
interesting.
anyone else.
My favourite one is the Cyber City Oedo vampire film, where the vampire they go up a space elevator and he gets sucked out through an airlock and just kind of vaporized, and then you see him sort of like reforming atomically, and then like all these sinews and things kind of lashing onto each other, and he comes back and he comes back in. I was like, yeah, that's how to do it if you are gonna live forever. But anyway, yeah, it's this is the artwork for my album is very much about this. I think if you did have a sort of tenuous immortality, that there's a danger that you really are now too scared to do anything remotely risky, because like the stakes are so much higher. Like, so say you were like, you could heal and medically be healed, now you're just like so much less inclined to kind of risk your life. Like, there needs to be some redundancy, there needs to be like the ability to kind of really fix everything if you're going to otherwise you're just going to live a life of it's just going to make it even more terrifying.
Yeah, a life of self-preservation.
Yeah, which is why I kind of did the artwork of people it's about living forever, but it's people doing stuff that seems like they're about to die, rather than sort of playing it safe.
Maybe a little vein to mine in terms of editing is a bit of things that last week on reflection, because I did reflect on what the things that we said. So there's a sort of on reflection section,
okay.
which might be the sort of one of the things we talked about was the fact that there's a lot, you said the sort of it's undeniable that there's lots of people out there that are way, way, way better off than you'll ever be. And I piped up in a sort of touchy-feely sort of, and people that are way, way worse off than you'll ever be. But actually, I don't agree with that. I think there are people out there that I'm only a few paychecks, as I am a professional, a professional who earns above a certain amount, etc., etc. The distance between me and a homeless person on the street is not a couple of days. But it might be a few months. I don't feel like I am so, and I think that's possibly one thing that the middle classes often forget, is that because, and I think tying it into this week's theme about death, etc. The death of Yugoslavia was not something that came into my parents' financial planning, and the death of Yugoslavia started a few years before it happened, with hyperinflation and not being paid, and before you know it, we had to leave when we left, because if we'd left it any later, we wouldn't have had the petrol money to drive to England.
Right. God.
So it's like, actually, I don't think there are people way, way worse off than I'll ever be. I think that I have to be mindful of the fact that something could happen to me that means that I become them. But I'm never going to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Because unless I get a time machine and buy some Bitcoin or something.
Well, I suppose maybe I was sort of like, I sort of felt like, oh yeah, I suppose she's got a point. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that at all. But yeah, no, I did. It certainly isn't symmetrical. Like,
no, it's not at all.
The kind of wealth gap is upwards is
enormous.
obscene. Like, it's incomprehensible.
yeah,
As
I
well,
can't even imagine.
downwards, I'm like, ooh, careful.
Actually. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's one of the things that, on reflection, I wondered. I'd kind of gone that. When people go, you're talking about something, and this man said, this man comes in, and they go, man or woman. Like I did that a bit, that's sort of like, or poorer than you, and I was like, actually, no. That's not what I think at all. I think that actually we're not that far. And one of the things that my father always used to talk about is the fact that the British are obsessed with whether they're middle class or upper middle class or lower middle class or middle class, lower. But actually, we're all working class, because if we don't work, we don't get to eat.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
And this is why this is part of the success of your Zuckerbergs is, and he said this, is like the fact he didn't have to work meant that he could do this. And if he'd had to work like one of us middle classes, like he couldn't, you can't do this stuff. So there's a lot of stuff being achieved by people who don't necessarily have to be doing that right now. And that's something I've been kind of become aware of in the last couple of years is, you get into this middle class trap of, you have to keep working to maintain a certain lifestyle, but it means that you can't really do anything more interesting because you're kind of constantly on that treadmill now. You're sort of trapped by it. But that's
trapped by your lifestyle. But yeah,
that's a different. Maybe that's another topic.
Thank you for listening. You can find me at Ivanka on Twitter and ivanka.blog.
And you can find me at Michael Forrest on Twitter and michaelforrestmusic.com.
You can find both of us at grandpodcast.com or email us hello@grandpodcast.com.
And you can, if you want, support us on Patreon with grandpodcast.com/pledge or grandpodcast.com/sledge.
What's a sledge?
I don't know. I just thought it'd be funny.
Oh.
Because it sounds like pledge.
You know.
I don't know. It's just my sense of humour there.
Fair enough.
Well, yeah, and thanks for listening, and hopefully see you next week.
Yes, thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.